They called him the devil of the East Coast, a man who never knelt, never begged, never loved. Yet on that blood-soaked night, he was on his knees holding a trembling child in his arms, whispering a promise to the dark. Take my empire. Burn my name. But if you touch them, I'll drag hell down with me. What no one knew was this. 10 years earlier, he had bought a woman with a contract, never realizing she would become the only thing he'd ever fear losing. And the child dying in his arms. He was the price of a love that was never meant to survive. Rain fell like shattered glass against the streets of Manhattan, blurring the city into streaks of silver and black. Elena Carter stood beneath the shadow of Blackwood Tower, her coat soaked through, fingers clenched so tightly around her phone that her knuckles had gone white. The call from the hospital still echoed in her ears. Your father has internal bleeding. Surgery must be performed within 6 hours. Payment is required up front, $120,000. It might as well have been a death sentence. Elena tilted her head back, staring up at the skyscraper that pierced the storm clouds like a blade. Blackwood Tower wasn't just a building, it was a warning. Every whispered rumor about Dominic Blackwood began and ended here. Mafia boss, financial ghost, devil of the East Coast. And tonight, it was her last hope. The security door slid open without a sound. She stepped inside. The elevator rose in silence, the numbers glowing red as they climbed. Elena's reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls, pale, exhausted, eyes too steady for someone about to bargain with the devil. She didn't look brave. She looked desperate. The doors opened on the top floor. A vast office stretched before her, dark wood and cold glass, city lights bleeding in through floor-to-ceiling windows. And at the center of it all, seated behind a massive desk like a king on a throne, was Dominic Blackwood. He didn't look like a monster. That was the most terrifying part. Dominic rose slowly when he saw her, his tailored black suit immaculate, his presence suffocating, sharp features, calm eyes. A man who had never been told no and never needed to raise his voice to enforce obedience. Elena Carter, he said, his voice low, smooth. You took your time. Her breath caught. He remembered her, 7 years ago, on a night much like this. She had found a wounded stranger bleeding in an alley behind her apartment. She had called an ambulance, given him her coat, walked away before the sirens arrived. She hadn't known then who he was. But he had never forgotten her. I didn't think you'd come, Dominic continued, studying her like a chess piece already claimed. Most people don't once they understand what I am. Elena swallowed. I don't have another choice. No, he agreed softly. You don't... She forced herself to meet his gaze. I need money. Tonight. How much $120,000? A pause. Then Dominic smiled. Not with amusement, but recognition. For your father, he said. Her heart skipped. You investigated me. I investigate everything, he replied. Especially miracles. Elena's hands trembled, but she didn't pull them back. I'll pay you back. Every cent. I'll sign a loan contract. Dominic lifted a hand. I don't give loans, he said. I make deals. He turned, walking toward the window, rain streaking the glass behind him. For a moment, his reflection overlapped with hers, dark and light colliding. You're intelligent, he said quietly. Talented, proud. You could beg 100 men and still walk away empty-handed. He turned back to her. But you came to me. Elena's voice was barely steady. Tell me your terms. Dominic walked to his desk and placed a folder down with deliberate calm. A contract, he said. 1 year. She frowned. Doing what you... He replied simply. The word landed like a blade. Silence filled the room, thick and unbearable. You want me to... Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. You want to buy me? Dominic didn't deny it. I want your time, he corrected. Your presence, your body, when I ask for it. No love, no expectations, no interference with my business. Her stomach twisted. "And after 1 year, you walk away," he said. "Debt cleared. No strings." Elena laughed softly, bitter. "Broken. You make it sound clean." "It isn't," Dominic said. "But it's honest." She stared at the folder. 1 year? 12 months to save her father's life. 12 months to lose something she wasn't sure she could ever get back. "What if I say no?" she asked. Dominic's gaze sharpened. "Then your father dies." The words were cruel in their simplicity. He didn't soften them, didn't pretend otherwise. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of her father teaching her how to draw, of the way his hands shook when the illness took hold, of the promise she had made at his bedside that morning. "I won't let you die." She opened her eyes. "Fine," she said. "I accept." Dominic slid a pen across the desk. As she signed her name, thunder cracked outside, as if the sky itself were bearing witness. The moment the pen left the paper, Dominic spoke again. "One more thing." She looked up. "What you will live here," he said. "Under my protection. No outside relationships. No disappearing acts." "I'm not a prisoner," she snapped. "No," Dominic agreed. "You're an investment." Her jaw tightened. "And what am I to you for the first time?" Something unreadable crossed his face. "Everything I've waited for." He said so quietly she almost missed it. That night, Elena lay awake in the guest room that felt more like a luxury cage. The rain had stopped, leaving the city eerily quiet. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Payment received. Surgery successful. Her breath shuddered out of her chest as tears spilled freely for the first time all day. She had saved him. But the price. A soft knock sounded at the door. Elena wiped her face. "Come in." Dominic stood there, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, the sharp edge of him slightly softened by exhaustion. "You did what you had to," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "That doesn't make you weak." She looked at him through tears. "It makes me owned." He stepped closer. "No," he said. "It makes you protected." Her heart pounded. "What's the difference?" Dominic hesitated. That hesitation was the first crack in his armor. "You'll learn," he said at last. "Sooner than you think." As he turned to leave, Elena whispered, "Why me?" His hand paused on the doorframe. "Because," Dominic said, his voice rough, 7 years ago, when you saved a dying man in an alley, you walked away without asking his name." He looked back at her, eyes dark with something dangerously close to devotion. "And men like me," he continued, "never forget mercy." The door closed behind him. Elena sat alone in the dark, heart racing. She didn't know it yet, but the contract she had just signed wasn't the beginning of her captivity. It was the beginning of Dominic Blackwood's undoing. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Morning arrived quietly in Blackwood Tower, filtered through sheer curtains and the muted hum of the city far below. Elena woke with a start, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar ceiling, the scent of expensive wood and something darker leather, perhaps, or the lingering presence of the man who owned this place. The contract. Memory settled in like a weight on her chest. She sat up slowly, bare feet touching a floor so cold and polished it felt unreal. The room was too perfect, every detail curated, every surface untouched. It didn't feel lived in. It felt watched. A soft chime sounded. "Breakfast will be served in 15 minutes, a woman's voice announced from an unseen speaker. Polite, controlled, distant. Elena exhaled. Even the house spoke with restraint. She dressed simply: jeans, a cream sweater, hair tied back, no silk robes, no diamonds. If this place intended to turn her into an ornament, she would resist it in the only way she could, by remaining herself. Dominic was already at the table when she entered the dining room. Sunlight cut across his sharp features, revealing faint shadows beneath his eyes. He looked like a man who didn't sleep, not because he couldn't, but because the world never allowed him to. He glanced up briefly. Sit. It wasn't unkind. It wasn't gentle either. Elena took the seat across from him. The table between them felt like a battlefield line, no weapons visible, but war inevitable. You don't eat much, Dominic observed as she pushed food around her plate. I eat when I'm hungry, she replied. Living here will change that, he said calmly. Schedules exist for a reason. She lifted her gaze. I'm not your soldier. No, Dominic agreed. You're not. The way he said it, slow, deliberate, made her pulse stutter. She expected instructions, rules, perhaps even a reminder of what she owed him. Instead, Dominic stood. I'll be gone most of the day. You're free to move around the house. Security will follow. Don't test them. That's it, she asked. For now. She watched him leave, unsettled not by his control, but by how little he chose to exercise it. Days passed, measured by silence and observation. Elena explored the tower's private floors, discovering art collections worth millions, bookshelves untouched, rooms designed to impress guests who never came. Dominic was often absent. When he returned, it was late. His presence announced only by a subtle shift in the air. They crossed paths like strangers orbiting the same gravity. He never forced her into his bed. That fact confused her more than anything else. Instead, he watched. From across rooms, from behind glass, from the edge of conversations with his men that fell silent the moment she appeared. She felt him noticing the way she refused the designer clothes delivered daily, the way she asked the staff's names, the way she spent hours sketching by the window, lost in a world untouched by his darkness. One evening, Dominic stopped behind her as she drew. You're wasting your talent, he said. Elena didn't look up. Talent wasted is still mine. He studied the sketch, an abstract cityscape fractured by light and shadow. It was beautiful, violent, honest. You see the world like it's already broken, he murmured. She finally turned. It is... For a moment, something raw flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. Dinner, he said curtly, walking away. The first crack appeared a week later. Elena returned from the garden, one of the few places that felt real, only to find the tower buzzing with unfamiliar energy. Voices were tense. Footsteps hurried. Dominic's right-hand man, Marcus, intercepted her. You should stay in your room tonight, he said. Why business? She recognized the lie instantly. Ignoring him, Elena walked straight into the heart of the storm. The conference room doors were open. Inside, Dominic stood at the head of the table, rage contained beneath a terrifying calm. Men argued in low voices, blood staining one man's sleeve. Elena froze. Dominic's head snapped toward her. Out, he commanded. What happened, she asked. The room fell silent. No one spoke to Dominic like that. His jaw tightened. This isn't your world. Then don't let it spill into mine, she said quietly. A beat passed. Then Dominic dismissed everyone with a single look. When they were alone, he turned to her. You disobeyed me. You didn't give me an order, Elena replied. You gave me fear. His eyes darkened. Fear keeps people alive. So does truth. Something shifted between them, dangerous, electric. You want the truth? Dominic asked. Someone tried to test my borders tonight. They failed. And the blood she pressed. He stepped closer. The cost. Elena's voice softened. Does it ever stop haunting you? Dominic laughed low. Humorless. Haunting implies guilt. And do you feel none? He stared at her, searching. Careful, he warned. Questions like that get people killed. She didn't back down. Then why am I still standing? Because you're the only one brave enough to ask, he thought but didn't say. That night, sleep eluded Elena. She wandered the halls until she reached the music room, a space she hadn't noticed before. A grand piano sat untouched in the center. She pressed a key. The sound echoed like a confession. Elena played softly, letting memory guide her fingers. The melody was imperfect, trembling raw. She didn't hear Dominic enter. He stood in the doorway, transfixed. "You play," he said quietly. "I used to," she replied. "Before life got loud." The music faded. Silence reclaimed the room. "Why haven't you touched this place?" she asked. Dominic shrugged. "Noise invites ghosts." Elena looked at him. So does silence. For the first time, Dominic sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. "Why do you refuse everything I give you?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Because if I take it, I'll forget who I was before you." Something inside him fractured. "You think I want to erase you?" he asked. "I think you don't know how not to." The honesty stunned them both. Days later, the staff whispered, "The boss's woman didn't wear diamonds. She didn't smile obediently. She argued. And Dominic Blackwood, ruthless, untouchable, let her." One evening, Elena overheard two men talking. "She's temporary." One said, "He'll break her, or she'll break him." The other replied. The words lodged in her chest. That night, Dominic found her standing on the balcony, city lights bleeding into the dark. "People think I'm weak because I'm here," she said without turning. "They think you'll destroy me." "And what do you think?" Dominic asked. She faced him fully. "I think you don't know what to do with someone who doesn't belong to you." A slow smile curved his lips, dangerous, intrigued. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't..." He stepped closer, close enough that she felt his breath. For a moment, the space between them trembled with possibility, but he stopped. That restraint was louder than any touch. As Dominic walked away, Elena realized something unsettling. She hadn't been bought to be owned. She had been brought here because Dominic Blackwood, master of control, had finally encountered something he couldn't command. And that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. The shift did not happen all at once. It crept in quietly, like a crack forming beneath ice thin, almost invisible, until one careless step made everything collapse. Elena began to notice the way the air changed when Dominic entered a room. Conversations stalled. Men straightened. Fear folded itself neatly into obedience. She had seen power before, but this was different. This was not authority earned, it was authority imposed, forged through blood and memory. And yet, with her, Dominic was restrained, too restrained. Their proximity grew dangerous in its restraint. They shared dinners without touching, passed each other in corridors where fingers almost brushed, breaths mingled, then separated. Every moment stretched tight with things unsaid. Elena felt it, the pull, the ache, the terrifying awareness that she was beginning to care. That was when the real danger began. It was late when she heard voices drifting through the half-open doors of the East Wing. Dominic's private meeting room, a space she had learned to avoid. She was on her way back from the library, arms full of books she never finished reading, when a familiar voice stopped her cold. Dominic. His tone was calm, controlled. The voice he used when emotions were liabilities. "You're letting her become a weakness," Marcus said quietly. Elena froze. "She's under my control," Dominic replied. A pause. "No," Marcus countered. "She's not." And that's the problem. Elena's heart hammered as she pressed herself into the shadow of the wall, breath shallow. "What do you suggest?" Dominic asked. "End it," Marcus said. "Before others notice. You know how this world works. Attachments get exploited." Another voice joined in, older, sharper. One of the council members. "If she's already compromised you," the man said, "you know the protocol." Elena's stomach twisted. Dominic didn't answer immediately. When he finally did, his words were precise, measured. "She's a transaction," he said. "Nothing more. When the contract ends, she leaves. If there are complications, they'll be handled." Elena felt something inside her fracture. Complications. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her abdomen. She had been dizzy lately. Tired. She had dismissed it as stress, as the emotional toll of living in a lion's den. But now, if she gets pregnant, the councilman pressed. A long silence followed. Then Dominic spoke again, his voice colder than she had ever heard it. Then it will be taken care of. Elena didn't hear the rest. She couldn't. The book slipped from her arms, hitting the carpet with a dull thud that echoed too loudly in her ears. She fled before anyone could see her, before her knees gave out, before the scream lodged in her chest found its way free. That night, Elena locked herself in the bathroom, staring at the thin white stick trembling in her hand. 2 lines, clear, merciless. She sank to the floor as the world tilted violently off its axis. A life, inside her, created in the space between restraint and longing, between glances held too long, between a man who didn't touch her and a woman who had already given him more than her body. Tears slid down her face in silence. She thought of Dominic's words. A transaction, taken care of. The child curled inside her like a fragile secret, already condemned by a world it had never chosen. By morning, Elena was gone. Dominic noticed the silence first, the absence of sound when he entered the dining room, the untouched place at the table, the way the tower felt suddenly hollow, like a body missing its pulse. Elena, he called once, irritation edging his voice. No answer. Security confirmed she hadn't left through the main exits. Cameras showed nothing unusual, no alarms triggered. That was when Dominic's control snapped. He tore through the tower, fury sharp and immediate. He opened doors he had never entered, invaded spaces he had pretended not to care about. Her room was empty, the closet bare, the drawers cleared. On the bedside table lay the contract folded neatly, deliberately, expired. Dominic stared at it, something cold settling in his gut. "Find her," he ordered. "Now." Hours passed, then a day. Nothing. No trace, no sightings, no signals. Elena Carter had vanished like smoke. She woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a monitor. The hospital ceiling swam into focus as panic seized her. Her hand flew to her stomach. Still there. Relief crashed through her so violently she sobbed. A nurse appeared, startled. "Easy," she said gently. "You fainted?" "Severe stress. Dehydration." Elena nodded numbly. "Is there someone we can call?" the nurse asked. "No," Elena whispered. "There isn't." She discharged herself within hours. By nightfall, she was on a bus headed west, the city shrinking behind her like a nightmare finally loosening its grip. She didn't look back. Weeks passed, then months. Elena rebuilt herself in fragments, small apartments, freelance design jobs, anonymity. She cut her hair, changed her routines, learned how to disappear. The world thought Dominic Blackwood was untouchable. They were wrong. He unraveled quietly. His temper sharpened. His decisions grew reckless. Deals collapsed. Enemies sensed blood in the water. But none of it mattered, because the only war he cared about he was losing. At night, Dominic replayed the memory of her standing on the balcony, eyes steady, voice fearless. "You don't know what to do with someone who doesn't belong to you." He had laughed then. Now, the words haunted him. 5 years later, fate twisted the knife. Dominic stared at the DNA report in his hand, vision blurring. Match 99.99%. Male child. Age 4 years, 11 months. His son. The room spun. The realization hit him with brutal clarities, not just that Elena had left pregnant, but that she had done so believing he would destroy what they had created. For the first time in his life, Dominic Blackwood felt something close to terror, because power could buy loyalty, violence could silence enemies. But time had already stolen 5 years he would never get back. And somewhere under a different sky, a woman he had loved without knowing how to say it was raising a child who bore his blood and his silence. The contract had ended, but the reckoning had only just begun. Los Angeles breathed differently from New York. The air was lighter, touched with salt and sun instead of steel and rain. Elena noticed it every morning when she opened the windows of her small apartment and let the warmth spill inside. The city did not press down on her chest. It did not whisper threats in every shadow. Here, she could almost pretend she was safe. Almost. She stood at the kitchen counter, cutting fruit into careful pieces while a small boy sat cross-legged on the floor, arranging toy cars into meticulous rows. His dark hair fell into his eyes as he concentrated, lashes too long for a child his age. There was a seriousness to him that didn't belong to 5-year-olds. "Lucas," Elena said softly. "Breakfast." He looked up at her with eyes so familiar it still stole her breath some mornings. "I'm almost done," he replied, voice calm, precise. She smiled despite herself. "You always are." Lucas padded over, climbing onto his chair without help. He ate quietly, observing the world the way Dominic once did, alert, measuring, as if already cataloging everything that might hurt him. That resemblance terrified her. She had named him Lucas Carter. No middle name, no questions answered, no past invited in. Elena's life had become a careful balance of ordinary and vigilance. She worked as a freelance designer, her talent honed by years of discipline and necessity. Clients came and went. Her name began to circulate in creative circles quietly, organically. She avoided attention, avoided patterns, avoided anything that could be traced back to the woman who once lived in a tower guarded by men with guns. At night, when Lucas slept, she sometimes allowed herself to remember. The way Dominic's presence filled a room, the restraint that had felt like respect and now tasted bitter in hindsight, the words she had overheard, sharp enough to scar, a transaction, taken care of. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing through the ache. Regret was a luxury she could not afford, not when a child depended on her to be stronger than fear. Across the country, Dominic Blackwood stood in a private office far from prying eyes, staring at a photograph he should never have possessed. A child, dark-haired, serious-eyed, too familiar. "This is her?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Marcus replied. "Los Angeles. She's careful. No social media. No public records connecting her to you." And the boy, Marcus hesitated. No listed father. Dominic closed his eyes. 5 years. 5 years stolen by silence and pride, and words spoken like weapons. "What do you want done?" Marcus asked. Dominic opened his eyes again, and this time there was no fury, only something far more dangerous. "Nothing," he said. "Yet." Marcus frowned. "Nothing." "She ran because she was afraid," Dominic continued. "If I move now, I prove she was right. You're the most powerful man on the East Coast," Marcus said carefully. "You don't need permission." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I need her trust." Trust. The one thing he had never learned how to earn. Elena felt it before she saw it. The shift. The prickle at the back of her neck when she walked Lucas home from school. The way a black sedan seemed to appear on the same streets too often. The subtle change in the air that told her the past was catching up. She told herself she was imagining it. Until one evening, as she buckled Lucas into his car seat, a man stepped into view. Not threatening, not aggressive, just standing there, hands visible, eyes sharp. "Elena Carter," he said politely. "We need to talk." Her blood ran cold. She slammed the car door shut and stepped in front of it instinctively, shielding Lucas with her body. "I don't know you," she said. "Leave." The man inclined his head slightly. "I'm not here to hurt you. Mr. Blackwood wants—" "Don't say his name," she snapped. The man paused, assessing her. He knows about the child. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. How she whispered. He had a right to. The man replied gently. No, Elena said, voice trembling but firm. He lost that right the moment he decided my child was a complication. The man said nothing. He simply handed her a card. When you're ready, he said. He's not coming for the boy, not without your consent. Elena laughed sharp. Broken. You expect me to believe that I expect you to survive, the man replied. Then he walked away. That night, Elena didn't sleep. Lucas stirred in his bed, drawn by her unrest. Mom, he murmured. She gathered him into her arms, holding him too tightly. I'm here, she whispered. I've got you. Are you scared? He asked. Eyes half closed. Elena swallowed. A little. He considered that, then wrapped his small arms around her neck. It's okay. I'll protect you. Tears burned her eyes. He already sounded too much like his father. Dominic arrived in Los Angeles alone. No entourage. No show of force. He stood across the street from Elena's apartment building at dusk, hands in his coat pockets, watching lights flicker on one by one. The building was ordinary, modest. She had chosen this life deliberately, a life without him. He didn't approach. Not that night. Instead, he watched a small figure appear at a window, Lucas, holding a toy airplane, face pressed to the glass. Dominic's breath caught painfully. That was my son. The realization was not explosive. It was crushing, slow, absolute. For the first time, Dominic Blackwood understood the true cost of his empire. It had not taken his enemies. It had taken his family. Elena sensed him before she saw him the next day. He stood outside the cafe where she worked, dressed simply, unarmed, unmistakable. The city moved around him, unaware of the gravity he carried. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She stepped outside before fear could root her to the floor. They stood facing each other, 5 years of silence vibrating in the space between them. You found us, she said. I never stopped looking, Dominic replied. Her laugh was bitter. You should have listened instead. I should have, he said quietly. She crossed her arms. Why are you here to see my son? The word "my" cut deep. You don't get to claim him, Elena said. Not after what you said. Not after what you chose. Dominic didn't defend himself. That night, he said slowly, I chose wrong. She stared at him, searching for manipulation, for control. She found none. What happens now, she asked. Dominic held her gaze. Now. I wait. I prove I'm not the man you ran from. And if I never believe you? His jaw tightened. Then I'll live with that. Elena looked past him, at the city she had built, the child she had protected. For the first time since she ran, she wasn't sure which future frightened her more, the one where Dominic Blackwood destroyed her life, or the one where he slowly became part of it again. Trust did not return in a rush. It arrived like a wounded animal, slow, cautious, ready to flee at the slightest wrong move. Dominic kept his distance, just as he promised. He did not appear at Elena's door. He did not follow her openly. He did not demand anything, not answers, not forgiveness, not even time. That restraint unsettled her more than pursuit ever could. Every instinct Elena had sharpened over the years told her this was dangerous. Dominic Blackwood was not a man who waited. He was a man who took. And yet, here he was, hovering at the edges of her life like a shadow that refused to cross the threshold. Lucas noticed first. There's a man, he said one afternoon, chewing thoughtfully on a pencil. He stands near the street sometimes. Elena's hand stilled mid-motion. What man, the tall one? Lucas replied. He looks sad. Her chest tightened. She forced a smile. Lots of people look sad. Lucas frowned, unconvinced. But he looks like me. That night, Elena stood at the window long after Lucas fell asleep, scanning the street below. She didn't see Dominic, but she felt him, the way one feels a storm gathering before the clouds arrive. She was not wrong. The warning came without ceremony. A black envelope slipped beneath her apartment door. No name, no sender. Inside was a single photograph. Lucas, stepping out of school. The timestamp was from that morning. Elena's breath hitched sharply as ice flooded her veins. Her hands shook as she checked the locks, the windows, the fire escape. Every shadow felt too deep, every sound too loud. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Hello, don't hang up," Dominic's voice said immediately, tight and controlled. "Are you alone?" Fear spiked into anger. "You said you wouldn't." "This isn't me," he cut in. "Listen to me, Elena. Someone knows about Lucas. This is no longer contained." Her legs nearly gave out. She sank onto the couch. "Who?" "People who see him as leverage," Dominic replied. "Or worse." She swallowed. "You said you wouldn't bring danger to him." "I said I wouldn't," Dominic corrected. "The world doesn't need my permission." Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of 5 lost years and 1 fragile child. "What do I do?" she whispered. There was no hesitation this time. "Pack a bag," Dominic said. "Enough for 3 days. I'll send someone you can trust. You won't see me unless you ask for me." Her heart thundered. "I don't want him near your world." "I know," Dominic said softly. "That's why I'm taking him out of it." They moved before dawn. Elena barely remembered the drive, only the tight grip of Lucas's hand in hers, the way he sensed fear even when she tried to hide it. The house Dominic had prepared sat nestled into the hills outside the city, quiet, anonymous, guarded in ways no one would notice unless they knew what to look for. Lucas explored cautiously, curiosity warring with instinct. "Is this a hotel?" he asked. "For a little while," Elena replied. "Is the sad man coming?" Her breath caught. "Why do you ask?" Lucas shrugged. "He looks like he wants to say sorry." Elena turned away so her son wouldn't see her eyes burn. Dominic watched the house from a distance, jaw clenched as reports filtered in through his phone. 2 rival families had confirmed interest. 1 had already made inquiries. They were not subtle. They were hungry. "Pull back all non-essential operations," Dominic ordered Marcus. "Anyone with loose loyalty gets cut." Marcus hesitated. "That'll look like weakness." Dominic's voice dropped. "Anyone who mistakes this for weakness will die." This was different from past wars. This time, the target wasn't territory or power. It was a child who shared his blood, and the woman he had failed to protect. The first attempt came 3 nights later. Elena woke to the sound of glass shattering. Training she never wanted kicked in. She grabbed Lucas, pressed him to the floor, heart pounding loud enough she was sure the intruders could hear it. Gunfire erupted outside. Shouts, orders, pain. Lucas didn't scream. He clung to her, shaking. Minutes passed like hours. Then silence. A knock came at the bedroom door. Elena nearly broke. "It's clear," a voice said. "Mr. Blackwood's orders." Her knees gave out as relief and terror collided. Dominic arrived an hour later. Not composed, not distant. Blood stained his sleeve, not his. He froze when he saw them huddled together on the bed, Lucas half asleep in Elena's arms. For a moment, the ruthless boss vanished. Only a man remained. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. Elena stood, fury burning through fear. "You said you could protect us. I can," Dominic replied. "And I will. But I won't lie to you again." She stared at him, eyes blazing. "Then tell me the truth." He didn't look away. "They won't stop," Dominic said. "Not now that they know he exists. The only way to end this is to burn everything connected to me or disappear you completely." Her voice trembled. "And what do you want?" Dominic looked at Lucas, then back at Elena. "I want to keep my son alive," he said. "Even if that means you never forgive me." Lucas woke fully then, blinking up at the stranger in the room. "You're the sad man," he said sleepily. Dominic knelt slowly, heart hammering in his chest. Dominic. Lucas studied him with unsettling seriousness. Do you know my mom? Yes, Dominic said. Very well. Lucas considered that. Are you dangerous? The question hit harder than any bullet ever had. Dominic answered honestly. Yes. Lucas nodded. Okay, don't hurt her. Something inside Dominic cracked wide open. I swear, he said quietly. On my life. The next days blurred into a new reality. Elena watched Dominic dismantle his own world piece by piece, shutting down routes, sacrificing profits, exposing himself to enemies he had once crushed without effort. For them, she saw the cost etched into his face, the way exhaustion hollowed him out, the way he never slept when Lucas was awake. One night, she found Dominic sitting on the floor outside Lucas's room, back against the wall. You don't have to do that, she said softly. He didn't look up. I do. She hesitated, then sat beside him. For the first time in years, they were close without tension tearing at the air. This is what I was afraid of, Elena whispered. Not that you'd hurt him, but that the world would use him to hurt you. Dominic's voice was rough. They already are. She turned to him. And if staying with us destroys you? He met her gaze steadily. Then it's a destruction I choose. Elena closed her eyes. Love, she realized, was not safety. It was risk. And despite everything, despite fear, despite the past, she was standing at the edge of something far more terrifying than running away. She was standing at the edge of believing him. And in the distance, unseen but relentless, the war was only just beginning. The house in the hills became a fortress disguised as peace. From the outside, it looked like a place meant for quiet living white walls softened by climbing vines, wide windows that welcomed sunlight, a garden that smelled faintly of citrus and earth. But beneath that illusion lived a tension that never slept. Elena felt it in the way Dominic positioned himself instinctively between her and Lucas whenever a door opened, in the way his men rotated shifts with military precision, in the silence that fell whenever a phone vibrated in his pocket. Danger no longer announced itself. It lingered, and with it came something far more unsettling than fear truth. Elena discovered it by accident. Dominic had left his jacket draped over the back of a chair, forgotten in a rare moment of exhaustion. When she picked it up to move it, a folded document slipped free and fell to the floor. She froze. She shouldn't have looked, but the paper was already open, the words glaring up at her like a confession that had waited too long. Internal Directive Blackwood Council. Subject Elena Carter. Status containment or elimination if exposure occurs. Her breath left her in a shallow gasp, hands trembling. Elena read on. Orders, dates, surveillance logs, and one final line that burned itself into her memory. Subject must be convinced to leave voluntarily. Direct protection by Dominic Blackwood is forbidden. Emotional attachment increases risk. The room tilted. So that night, the words she overheard, the cruelty in his voice, the way he had pushed her away without explanation. It hadn't been indifference. It had been strategy. Elena sank into the chair, the document crumpling in her fist as the truth finally surfaced from the grave she had buried it in. Dominic hadn't been choosing power over her. He had been choosing her life over his heart. She confronted him that night, not with fury, with a stillness so sharp it frightened them both. Dominic stood at the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled up, hands braced against stone as if the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. He looked up when she entered, eyes already tired, already prepared for battle. You were never going to tell me, Elena said quietly. He stilled. What did you find? He asked. She placed the document between them. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I didn't want you to know, Dominic said finally. Knowing would have kept you close. And close was dangerous. Elena laughed softly. Broken. So you let me believe you'd destroy our child instead. His jaw clenched. I let you believe I was a monster, because you thought it would save me, she whispered. Yes, the word fell like a blade. You let me run, she continued, voice trembling now. You let me spend 5 years terrified that you'd hunt us down when all along. You were the only one standing between us and death. Dominic stepped toward her. Elena. Don't, she said, holding up a hand. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Pain flickered across his face. Every day. You don't get to decide what kind of pain I can survive, she said. You don't get to protect me by destroying me. I didn't know another way, he said hoarsely. This world doesn't forgive weakness, and loving me made you weak. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later that night, Elena sat beside Lucas's bed, watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell steadily, innocent of the war waged in his name. Dominic hovered in the doorway. He deserves better than this, Elena said softly. Yes, Dominic replied. He deserves a father who isn't hunted. She turned to him slowly. Then why are you still in this? Because leaving means admitting fear, he almost said. Instead, he said, because walking away doesn't make the danger disappear. It makes it chase you. And what if staying destroys you? She asked. His gaze softened. Then at least I'll know why. The attack came the next morning. Not loud, not reckless, calculated. A sniper round shattered the front window just as Elena ushered Lucas toward the back hallway. Dominic reacted instantly, body shielding them as glass exploded inward. Down, he shouted. Gunfire erupted from the perimeter. Alarms screamed. Lucas cried out, clinging to Elena as Dominic barked orders into his earpiece. Face carved from stone. They were breached. Dominic realized it in a flash the enemy had learned his patterns, learned his limits, and learned where his heart lived. This is escalating, Marcus said over comms. They're not testing anymore. They want the boy. Dominic's grip tightened on his weapon. No, he said coldly. They want me. The safe room sealed behind them. Steel doors locking with a heavy finality. Elena paced, adrenaline coursing through her veins. How many she demanded. Enough, Dominic replied. Too many. She stared at him. Then this ends now. He turned sharply. No. Yes, she insisted. I won't let him grow up running. I won't let him inherit fear. Dominic's voice dropped. You think surrendering will save him, I think dismantling the war will, she said. And you're the war. The words struck deep. Dominic looked at Lucas, who clutched a toy soldier in his small fist, eyes wide but resolute. What if he grows up hating me? Dominic asked quietly. Elena stepped closer. Then at least he'll grow up. For a long moment, Dominic said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered his weapon. The decision came swiftly after. Dominic called a meeting one that would rewrite the rules of the underworld. He offered concessions no one had ever dared suggest. Roots, names, assets, territory soaked in blood and profit alike. In exchange, he demanded one thing: immunity, not for himself, for Elena, for Lucas. The council laughed, until Dominic laid out the evidence he had collected for years, their crimes, their betrayals, the secrets that could burn them all. The laughter died. You'd burn the empire, one man said incredulously. Dominic's voice was steady. I already am. When he returned to the house, it was past midnight. Elena waited for him on the terrace, the city lights distant and blurred. It's done, he said quietly. Or it will be soon. She searched his face. What did it cost? He hesitated. Everything I was. She stepped forward, resting her forehead against his chest. And what are you now? His arms came around her, tentative at first, then certain. A man who finally knows what matters. She closed her eyes, breathing him in, not the power, not the danger, but the man beneath it all. For the first time since fate tangled their lives together, they kissed without fear chasing the moment away. It was not desperate. It was not rushed. It was a promise forged in survival and truth. But even as they held each other, far away, alliances shifted, enemies recalculated. The underworld took note of the cracks forming in a once untouchable throne. Dominic Blackwood had chosen love over dominion, and the world was not done punishing him for it. The underworld did not collapse all at once. It resisted. Like a wounded beast, it lashed out before dying. News of Dominic Blackwood's concessions spread through whispered channels, coded calls, encrypted messages, smoke-filled rooms where men who had built their lives on fear suddenly tasted it themselves. Routes went dark, accounts froze, allies turned cautious, then hostile. An empire built on blood did not forgive betrayal, especially when the betrayal was love. Dominic felt it in every step he took. Men who once bowed now watched him too closely. Meetings grew shorter. Smiles no longer reached eyes. Power slipped through his fingers, not with violence, but with quiet, calculated withdrawal. He welcomed it, because every piece of territory he surrendered was another wall torn down between his son and the world that wanted to consume him. Still, there were consequences he could not fully control. "Elena needs to leave," Marcus said one night, voice low as they stood on the terrace overlooking the city. "They'll come for her first. You know that." Dominic didn't answer immediately. Below them, traffic moved like veins of light, indifferent to the war being fought above. "She won't," Dominic said finally. Marcus exhaled. "You're asking her to stand in the line of fire?" "No," Dominic replied. "I'm asking her to trust me." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You used to trust no one." Dominic's mouth curved faintly. People change. That scared Marcus more than any enemy ever had. Elena sensed the shift too. The house no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a waiting room before something irreversible. Dominic was quieter, more distant, carrying the weight of decisions he rarely spoke aloud. At night, when Lucas slept, Elena would find Dominic staring out into the dark, jaw tight, eyes haunted. "You don't have to do this alone," she said one evening, stepping beside him. He shook his head. "Some things are mine to carry." She touched his hand. "And some are mine to share." He looked at her then, really looked at the woman who had survived him, left him, returned not out of weakness but choice. "Once this is done," he said softly, "I won't be able to protect you the way I used to." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "I don't want a king," she replied. "I want a man who comes home." Something in Dominic's chest loosened. Then the phone rang. The message was brief. They rejected the terms. Dominic closed his eyes. Of course they had. The council did not fear morality. It feared precedent. If Blackwood could walk away, what stopped others from following that night? Dominic made the final move. He leaked everything: financial trails, names, locations, proof so clean and devastating it could not be ignored. Law enforcement agencies across 3 states woke to sealed files suddenly unlocked, secrets dragged into daylight. It was not justice. It was annihilation. The underworld erupted: raids, arrests, internal executions, long-standing alliances shattered overnight. Men Dominic had once called brothers turned on each other in panic, desperate to survive. And in the center of it all stood Dominic Blackwood, no longer untouchable, but untethered. "They'll come for you now," Elena said, fear threading her voice as news broke across every channel. Dominic nodded. "Yes, and us." He took her face gently in his hands. "I won't let them." That promise would have meant everything once. Now, Elena knew better. Promises were fragile. Sacrifice was not. The final attack came without warning. A convoy ambushed Dominic's car on a mountain road just after dusk. Bullets tore through steel. Tires screamed. The world narrowed to survival and instinct. Dominic fought his way out, blood slick on his hands, body moving on pure will. By the time reinforcements arrived, the attackers were dead or gone. Dominic was injured. Not fatally, but enough. Elena met him at the safe house, heart shattering at the sight of blood soaking his shirt. "You said it was almost over," she whispered as medics worked quickly. "It is," Dominic replied, teeth clenched against pain. This was the last gasp. She pressed her forehead to his. "I can't lose you." "You won't," he said, voice rough. "Not now." But when he closed his eyes, Elena saw something she had never seen before. Relief, as if part of him had already let go. Recovery was slow. For the first time in his life, Dominic was forced to be still. No meetings, no weapons, no control, just time. Time with Lucas, who brought him drawings and questions and the simple, devastating honesty of a child. "Why do people want to hurt you?" Lucas asked one afternoon. Dominic hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Because I hurt them first." Lucas considered this. "Are you still going to hurt people?" "No," Dominic said quietly. "I'm done." Lucas nodded, satisfied. "Okay, then you can stay." The words struck deeper than any verdict. Stay. Not rule. Not conquer. Stay. Elena watched them from the doorway, heart aching with a fragile, terrifying hope. Dominic was learning how to exist without fear being his armor, without power being his identity. He laughed more softly, cautiously, as if the sound itself was unfamiliar. But the world did not forget him so easily. The charges were coming. Formal, public, unavoidable. "You'll go to prison," Elena said one night, voice breaking. "Won't you?" Dominic nodded. "Yes." Her breath hitched. "For how long?" "Long enough," he replied. "But not forever." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "We just found each other again." Dominic pulled her into his arms, holding her as if memorizing the shape of her. "I told you once," he murmured. "I'd live with whatever you chose." She shook her head. "This isn't what I choose." "No," he agreed. "This is what I owe." The morning Dominic surrendered himself, the sky was painfully clear. Lucas clung to his leg, refusing to let go. "Do you have to?" he asked. Small voice trembling. Dominic knelt, ignoring the eyes watching them. "I do, but I'll come back." "When?" He smiled faintly. "Sooner than you think." Lucas wrapped his arms around Dominic's neck. "Don't be sad," he whispered. "We'll wait." Elena stood behind them, heart breaking open. As Dominic was led away, he looked back only once, not at the cameras, not at the men who had once feared him, at Elena. And in his eyes, she saw it clearly. The empire was gone, but the man finally, painfully free, was still hers. And somewhere in the wreckage of blood and power, a new life waited to be built from what survived the fire. Prison did not break Dominic Blackwood. It stripped him. The first night inside, when the cell door closed with a sound that echoed too long, Dominic sat on the narrow bunk and listened to the distant shouts, the metallic rhythm of gates, the heavy breathing of men who slept with one eye open. This world was smaller, uglier, honest in a way power never had been. No one bowed here. No one cared who he used to be. And for the first time in his life, Dominic felt light, not free, but unburdened by the constant demand to dominate. He learned quickly, keep your head down, speak little, watch everything. Respect earned, not demanded. Violence existed, but it was blunt, inelegant, nothing like the calculated cruelty he had once commanded from afar. At night, when the noise dimmed, his thoughts returned to Elena, and to Lucas. Elena marked time differently, not by days, but by small survivals. Lucas losing his first tooth, his fear of the ocean slowly fading, the way he insisted on setting an extra place at the table just in case. She sent Dominic letters every week, not dramatic confessions, not promises, details. Lucas learned to ride without training wheels today. He didn't fall once. I planted tomatoes on the balcony. They're stubborn, but growing. Sometimes I still wake up afraid, but not alone. Dominic read every word until the pages softened at the creases. He wrote back carefully, his handwriting steady but restrained. "Tell Lucas I'm proud of him. Tell him I'll race him when I get out. Tell him. Thank you for waiting." Outside, the world kept spinning. Dominic's name slowly faded from headlines. The empire he dismantled continued to rot under investigation. Some men went to prison. Others disappeared. The myth of Blackwood turned into a cautionary tale, whispered to ambitious fools who believed power could be held without cost. Elena watched it all from a distance. She refused interviews, declined offers to tell her inspiring story. She protected Lucas from curiosity and pity alike. He knew his father was away fixing something he broke. That was enough. Sometimes, late at night, Elena wondered if she was being foolish. Waiting was a choice, and choices could be mistakes. But then she would remember the way Dominic had looked at Lucas, like redemption was finally something he could touch. And she stayed. The first visit was the hardest. Elena almost turned back twice before reaching the security checkpoint. The building smelled of disinfectant and resignation. Her heart pounded as she waited, palms damp, breath shallow. When Dominic entered the room, dressed in neutral colors, hair shorter, face leaner, something inside her tightened painfully. He looked human, not untouchable, not terrifying, just a man who had been worn down to what mattered. They sat across from each other, hands hovering uselessly above the table. "You look well," he said quietly. "So do you," she replied, though it wasn't entirely true. There was so much she wanted to say. Instead, she slid a folded drawing across the table. Lucas had drawn 3 figures holding hands. One was taller than the others. One had long hair. All 3 were smiling. Dominic swallowed hard. "I keep this with me," Elena said. "He wanted you to have a copy." Dominic pressed his fingers to the paper like it might disappear. "I don't deserve this." "No," Elena said gently, but he gave it anyway. They spoke for an hour, about nothing important, about everything. When time was up, Dominic stood reluctantly. "Elena," he said, voice low, "if you ever decide this is too much." She shook her head. "Don't." He nodded. "Then I'll keep earning my way back." Years passed, not quickly, not slowly, just steadily. Dominic became someone else inside those walls. He taught other inmates how to read contracts, how to think beyond survival. He broke up fights instead of starting them. Guards learned to trust him. He never asked for favors. He waited. Outside, Elena's career blossomed. Her designs matured quietly powerful, layered with restraint and resilience. She refused to let pain define her work, but it shaped it nonetheless. Lucas grew into his questions. Was Dad bad, he asked one night. Elena considered carefully. He did bad things. Is he still bad? No, she said softly. He's trying very hard not to be. Lucas nodded, satisfied for now. The day Dominic was released, the sky threatened rain. Elena stood in the parking lot with Lucas, heart racing as gates opened and men stepped out into freedom that looked smaller than they remembered. Then she saw him. Dominic walked slowly, like he didn't trust the ground yet. When his eyes found them, everything else vanished. Lucas broke free from Elena's hand and ran. Dominic dropped to his knees just in time to catch him. "I waited," Lucas announced proudly. Dominic laughed a sound rough with emotion. "I see that." He stood, holding his son, and met Elena's gaze over Lucas's shoulder. No words. They didn't need them. Life after prison was not simple. There were restrictions, conditions, enemies who still whispered. But Dominic stayed away from everything that resembled his old life. He opened a small consultancy, advising businesses legally, quietly. He cooked dinner. He attended school meetings. He learned how to be bored and grateful. One night, months later, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Elena sat beside him on the couch. "You're different," she said. He smiled faintly. I know. She studied his profile. I don't miss the man you were. Neither do I. She hesitated. But I still... Remember, so do I, he said softly. And I'm sorry for every day I made you afraid. Elena leaned into him. I'm not afraid anymore. Later that night, Dominic stood on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer through rain. Elena joined him, slipping her hand into his. We survived, she murmured. Dominic squeezed her fingers. We chose each other. Below them, the city pulsed dangerous, beautiful, indifferent. For the first time, Dominic Blackwood did not feel the urge to conquer it. He only wanted to belong. And as Elena rested her head against his shoulder, and Lucas slept peacefully inside, Dominic knew with quiet certainty the most dangerous thing he had ever done wasn't destroying an empire. It was believing he deserved a second life, and daring to live it. Peace did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, in moments so ordinary they almost went unnoticed. Sunday mornings with burnt pancakes, Lucas insisting Dominic attend every school event, even the painfully dull ones. Elena humming while working, a habit she hadn't realized she'd lost until it returned. For a while, life felt almost fragile in its simplicity, like something that could shatter if named too loudly. Dominic understood this better than anyone. He lived carefully now, not cautiously, but deliberately. Every choice weighed against the life he nearly destroyed. He avoided old contacts, old cities, old instincts. He was present in ways he had never been before, listening instead of commanding, asking instead of deciding. And still, the past did not forget him. It never did. The first sign came as a letter. No return address. No threat. Just a name written in ink that bled slightly into the paper. Victor Hale. Dominic stared at it long after Elena had taken Lucas to school. The name belonged to a ghost, a man presumed dead after the collapse of the old empire. A strategist. A survivor. Someone who never forgave betrayal. Inside the envelope was a single sentence. You burned the house. Did you think no one was trapped inside? Dominic folded the letter slowly. The weight of it settled in his chest like a familiar ache. Elena noticed the shift before Dominic said anything. He became quieter again, not distant, but guarded. His eyes tracked shadows a little too closely. His hand lingered on Lucas's shoulder longer than necessary. One evening, she placed her laptop aside and faced him. What's wrong? She asked gently. Dominic hesitated. Old instincts urged him to shield her from danger, from truth. But that was the man he no longer wanted to be. Someone from my past reached out. He said. Her expression didn't change, but her breathing did. How dangerous, potentially. He admitted, not immediately. Elena nodded slowly. You're not handling this alone. He met her gaze. I wasn't planning to. That answer mattered more than he realized. Victor Hale made his move subtly. No violence, no threats, just pressure. Dominic's consultancy lost 2 clients overnight. A landlord suddenly refused to renew a lease. A rumor surfaced online, carefully worded, legally harmless, morally poisonous. Dominic recognized the tactic. Victor wasn't trying to destroy him. He was trying to remind him who still held power. You can't keep running, Elena said one night, tension threading her voice. Not forever. I'm not running, Dominic replied. I'm waiting. For what? For him to reveal himself. Elena studied him. And when he does, Dominic's jaw tightened. Then I end it. Cleanly. She reached for his hand. Promise me this won't cost you who you've become. He squeezed her fingers. That man is gone. But saying it didn't make it invulnerable. Victor finally surfaced at a charity gala. Dominic had reluctantly agreed to attend a calculated risk meant to keep his life visible. Normal. The room shimmered with polished wealth and practiced smiles. Elena stood beside Dominic, radiant and composed, her hand warm in his. Then Victor stepped into view. He was older than Dominic remembered, thinner, sharper around the eyes. He smiled like a man greeting an old friend. Dominic Blackwood, Victor said smoothly. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me. Dominic's expression remained calm. I never forget debts. Victor's gaze flicked to Elena, lingering, assessing. And this must be her, he said. The reason you set fire to your kingdom? Elena met his stare without flinching. I'm his partner. Victor chuckled softly, brave or foolish. Dominic stepped subtly in front of her. You didn't come here to insult us. No, Victor agreed. I came to offer you a choice. They spoke privately moments later, tucked away in a quiet corner. You cost me everything, Victor said, but I admire conviction. Walk away from the public eye. Disappear. I'll do the same. Dominic shook his head. You won't stop. Victor smiled thinly. Then protect them, he said, nodding toward Elena and Lucas across the room. If you can. The challenge was clear. Victor wasn't afraid of Dominic. He was betting on his restraint. That night, Dominic barely slept. Elena lay beside him, aware of every shallow breath. You're thinking about sacrificing yourself again, she said softly. He didn't deny it. She turned to face him. Listen to me. Loving us doesn't mean erasing yourself. I know, he whispered. But I won't let him near you. Then don't, she said firmly. But don't disappear either. Lucas needs you here. I need you here. He searched her face. What if staying puts you in danger? Elena smiled sadly. We've already survived worse. Her faith terrified him and strengthened him. Dominic chose a different path. He went public not with threats, but with transparency. He cooperated fully with ongoing investigations, offered testimony that tied up loose ends Victor relied on to remain hidden. Victor retaliated with exposure attempts, but Dominic's honesty diffused them. The man who had once ruled from shadows now stood in the light, unafraid of scrutiny. The world saw not a kingpin, but a man paying for his past and refusing to run from it. Victor's leverage shrank. Weeks later, Victor vanished. No confrontation, no dramatic ending. Just gone. Sometimes, that was how the most dangerous wars ended, not with blood, but with irrelevance. Life resumed its careful rhythm. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in quiet gold, Dominic stood in the kitchen, watching Elena laugh at something Lucas said, her joy unguarded. The sight struck him with unexpected force. He reached into his pocket, fingers closing around something small and heavy. Later, when Lucas had gone to bed, Dominic took Elena's hands. I don't want to be extraordinary, he said quietly. I want to be chosen. Her eyes softened. You already are. He lowered himself to one knee anyway, not out of drama, but certainty. Stay with me, he said, not because of what we survived, but because of what we can still become. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, the ring was simple, elegant, honest, like the life they were building. Outside, the city hummed unaware, indifferent. Inside, 3 hearts beat steadily, no longer between fear and power, but something far rarer, belonging. And for Dominic Blackwood, that was the greatest victory of all. The wedding was nothing like the life Dominic Blackwood once lived. There were no towering halls, no armed guards disguised as guests, no deals whispered between champagne glasses. Instead, there was sunlight filtering through white linen, the soft sound of waves folding into the shore, and a garden filled with people who had earned their place simply by loving them. Elena stood barefoot on the grass, the hem of her dress brushing her ankles as the breeze played with loose strands of her hair. She looked nothing like the woman who once ran in fear, clutching a secret to her chest. She looked like someone who had survived and chosen joy anyway. Dominic waited at the end of the aisle, hands steady, heart anything but. He wore no symbols of power, no reminders of who he used to be, just a tailored suit, simple and dark, framing a man who had learned that strength did not come from control, but from staying. When Elena appeared, His breath caught the same way it had the first night he saw her years ago. Only this time, there was no fear chasing the moment. Lucas walked beside her, solemn in his small suit, gripping a ring pillow with exaggerated seriousness. "Don't trip," he whispered loudly. Elena smiled down at him. "I won't. Promise." When she reached Dominic, Lucas looked between them and nodded in approval before stepping aside. "You may proceed," he announced. Laughter rippled through the guests, breaking the last thread of tension Dominic hadn't realized he was holding. The ceremony was brief. They didn't speak of destiny or fate. They spoke of choice, of rebuilding, of forgiveness that did not erase the past, but refused to let it rule the future. When Dominic said his vows, his voice did not shake. "I loved you when I didn't know how to love without hurting," he said. "And I love you now, knowing that love means staying, even when it's hard." Elena met his gaze, eyes shining. "I choose you," she replied. "Not because you're perfect, but because you became honest with yourself, with me, with our son, and because I am stronger with you than I ever was alone." When they kissed, it wasn't dramatic. It was real. The kind of kiss that promised mornings and arguments and quiet nights and forgiveness spoken without words. Life after the wedding did not change overnight. It softened. Their home became a place of routines that felt sacred in their simplicity. Breakfasts eaten together. Homework spread across the table. Dominic learning, still learning how to live without looking over his shoulder. Sometimes the past knocked softly. A memory. A headline. A stranger who looked too long. But it no longer owned him. Dominic volunteered with organizations that helped former offenders rebuild their lives, not as a savior, but as someone who understood the weight of starting over. He spoke rarely of his past, but when he did, it was without pride or shame. Just truth. Elena's work flourished in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her designs carried a quiet depth that critics couldn't quite name. She smiled when they called it resilient. Lucas grew quickly, as children always did. He asked fewer questions about the past and more about the future. "Can we go camping next summer? Will you teach me how to drive?" "Do you think people can really change?" Dominic always answered honestly. Yes. One evening, years later, Dominic stood on the balcony of their home, watching the city glow below, the same city he once tried to own. Elena joined him, resting her head against his shoulder. "You're quiet," she said. He smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "Dangerous," she teased. He laughed softly. "I was thinking about how small everything feels now." She tilted her head to look at him. "Small in a bad way," he said. "Small in the way that makes things precious. Inside." Lucas practiced piano halting, determined, slightly off key. Dominic closed his eyes. This was the life he had almost lost. Years passed. Lucas grew tall. Elena's hair gained threads of silver she wore without apology. Dominic's scars faded, though they never vanished completely. On the anniversary of Dominic's release from prison, they returned to the coast where they had married. No ceremony this time, just the three of them, sitting on the sand as the sun dipped low. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucas asked suddenly. "Everything Dad gave up." Dominic considered carefully. "No," he said. "I regret not giving it up sooner." Lucas nodded, thoughtful. "I'm glad you did." Elena reached for Dominic's hand, squeezing gently. Somewhere in the distance, the ocean breathed steadily. On a quiet night years later, long after Lucas had gone to college, Dominic woke to find Elena watching him. What he murmured. She smiled softly. "I was just thinking. We made it." He brushed his thumb along her cheek. "We did. And you're happy." Dominic didn't hesitate. "I am." She rested her forehead against his. "Good. Because this life ordinary, imperfect, it's everything I wanted." He kissed her then, slow and familiar, filled with a gratitude so deep it no longer hurt. Dominic Blackwood was once a man who ruled through fear. He became a man who learned to kneel not in defeat, but in devotion. He did not escape his past. He outgrew it. And in the end, his greatest legacy was not an empire dismantled or a name erased from whispered rooms, but a family built on truth, patience, and the quiet courage to choose love again and again, not dramatically, not loudly, but forever.